thank you all for being here. If you're here for the 5-year consolidated plan process, the public meeting, all of that, you're in the right place, all right? If you're looking for something else, you may not be in the right place. So my job is to do two things. One is I'm going to welcome you and to tell you a little bit about today, and then I get the best job is to introduce the fine folks on this team that will be assisting you tonight. My name is Kevin DuBose. I'm Director of Housing and Neighborhood Development for the City of Knoxville, and our department administers all of our federal funds for housing and community development. And it's an interesting day to be talking about federal funds. Okay, I'll say a little bit about that in a minute. We also administer our local affordable housing fund and support agencies in a lot of different ways. This process you're here for today is for that federal funding piece. It requires us to listen to the community and to talk to the community. And we've had a process over the past several months that has been very robust that you're going to hear about today. So we're going to put you to work. What we need to do is validate some of the things that we've heard. Okay, so we're about to be at that stage in the process where we're going to be setting priorities. Okay, and priorities will speak to how we spend the money over the next 5 years. Now, a little bit about what happened today. There may be a question or two about the ban, and then at 5 o'clock, the judge blocked the ban on federal funding. We don't know more than you know on this. We do want to encourage you to, speak to your representatives about the importance of the local work being done here in Knoxville. But we're going to keep our head down and keep doing the work. We're going to keep plugging away and making a difference for Knoxvillians. With that said, let me introduce our team. So we have a couple of different areas. Administration, Mike Dunthorne works with me in administration, and Wendy is in the back. And then there's disability services. Stephanie would normally be here, but she's a little under the weather. Our awesome grants administration team will do the bulk of the leading today, and led wonderfully by Hope Ely. There you go. And Bailey and Thomas. And Ava's not with us, but she may be online. And then our housing team is led by Beth Bacon in the back, sitting back there with her wonderful mother. Wave hi, Beth. There you go. And the balance of our housing team are I think, at a conference today. So we're blessed with a wonderful, hardworking team and grateful for this work that you'll hear about today. Now, the person I did not introduce, because I want to save her for last, is our Community Development Administrator, Linda Russ. So Linda is our last line of defense for all of our compliance. So all of the monies flow through Linda. I don't sign anything until Linda blesses it. So she has a huge responsibility, and she does a great job in doing this process. She's done it for many years, both in Knox County and now with us. And so we're treated by just such a robust standard that she set. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Linda.
Do you want to introduce our neighborhood revitalization team?
Oh, I left out a team. Neighborhood revitalization. Jillian, where are you? Right behind you. Raise your hand. Thank you, Linda. Jillian's here. And Kathy Ellis. Kathy, great, thank you. So they are the team that are working on problem properties, blighted properties, trying to really transform our communities that are dealing with blight or abandoned vacant properties. So, for real this time, turn it over to Linda.
Thank you, Kevin. Welcome. We're so glad to see all of your smiling faces. I'm glad that the weather isn't raining and it's not too cold, so we appreciate you being out here. We also appreciate the people who are joining us online. So this is a hybrid meeting where we have people who are attending via Zoom and also your wonderful presence here in the room this evening. I want to point out that we would ask you to please, if you're on the Zoom chat, to please put your name and the organization, if any, that you're representing here tonight. And I hope that everybody in the room has filled out, worked on our sign-in sheet in the back. So that way we can keep you abreast of future developments with the consolidated plan. I also want to tell you, if you didn't know, that we have snacks in the back. We have some sandwiches and chips and bottles of water. So we know that it's a sacrifice to come out and have a meeting at 6 o'clock in the evening. So we appreciate that, but don't want you to go hungry. So please feel free to get up and help yourselves. The restrooms are actually in a little hallway right adjacent to the back doors here of the room. So if you need to use the facilities, please help yourselves. So this meeting this evening is not going to be recorded, but we want to give you some places to find some information. So first is a link to a dedicated webpage that we made for the consolidated plan. It's at knoxvilletn.gov/consolidated plan, no space between consolidated and plan. And you can find information there about our timeline. And we're also going to post some information there tomorrow. So the slide deck, you can get a PDF of that. And some of the information that we're sharing this evening, you can find that information too, and more detail, as much detail really almost as you want about our process we're willing to share. We've got some information posted around the room. It's actually in the little alcove here. We've got information about affordable housing programs, homelessness, and also economic development, neighborhood revitalization. And those boards help explain what we've done during the current consolidated plan period. So we're in the waning months of our 2020 to 2024 5-year consolidated plan. And we put together those boards to help share information with you about what we've been doing with affordable housing, homelessness, economic development, neighborhood revitalization. So the meeting this evening, we're not going to be sharing a lot of detail about what we've done. We're going to, in terms of the accomplishments and what kind of programs that we run and what we've been able to accomplish with those. It's not that we aren't proud of them. We are very proud to talk with you about it. But what we're going to be doing this evening is really talking to you about the process by which we came up with some draft funding priorities. So that's the kind of at the end of the meeting when we will ask you to stay and to share some feedback with us so we can hear what we may have missed, what you'd like to add, but we want to share with you that process. So, please, feel free to ask questions, but you can also walk around the room after we break, and you can see some of the accomplishments we've had during our current consolidated plan. Let's see, we're going to give you a copy of the presentation, draft funding priorities. We're going to hand those out when the time is right. We're going to have you wait with bated breath for those. We plan to post a draft of the consolidated plan in April. And we'll also have another meeting back here in this room on April 22nd at 6 p.m. And all of that information can be found on that consolidated plan webpage. If you go to our regular, our department webpage, it's knoxvilletn.gov/development, and you can find some of the information we're going to talk about tonight on housing, homelessness, and some other information. We're going to ask you to hold your questions until the end of the presentation, And then we're going to break out into groups. So we want to get your feedback, we want to get your questions. So we'll be asking you at the end of the presentation to grab your chair and probably come to a corner. And then we have facilitators who are going to lead you in some feedback and ask you what you think about what you thought about the presentation. If you're the quiet and shy sort and you aren't comfortable speaking up in a group, you're welcome to put your comments on an index card. We have index cards at the back of the room. For people who are online who want to share their feedback, we're going to have just one breakout group, and people will be able to comment with the chat function. And then we're going to record that and keep that chat function or the chat comments. And if people have questions, and we'll be able to answer some of those questions, and people who are on the Zoom will be able to see the answers to those questions. If you need to leave early, you can always email me, Linda Rust, lrust@knoxvilletn.gov. So our agenda this evening is we're going to share some background information and talk to you a little bit about what the Consolidated Plan is, because maybe you haven't been involved at this point, so we want to be able to share with you what the Consolidated Plan is. We're going to talk with you about our community engagement process, because community engagement and consultation and public involvement are a big part of this process. And we spent from, August through the end of October doing a community engagement process that we want to share with you. So we're going to talk with you about that process and what the findings were. We're going to talk about some other information that impacts the Consolidated Plan. And then we're going to give you our draft funding priorities. And they're draft because we need to, we think we've through this process, our findings are these draft funding priorities. But we need your feedback. We need to know if there's something that we missed, if something that we need to add. Sometimes you can't see the forest through the trees, if you've heard that expression. So your feedback tonight will be very valuable in helping us to understand that. We're also going to talk, we're going to have some folks, Susan from KCDC to talk about the Transforming Western project. Jennifer Searle, who's with our City Community Agency grants, will talk to you about their grant process. And Alana McKissick is here with Knox County Grants and Community Development, and she'll talk with you about that process as well. Because when I say these draft funding priorities, we are starting our funding process actually January 31st. So this Friday we'll be starting that process, and there's other funding processes that we want you to know about. If you happen to represent an agency or an organization that may be interested in applying for funds, we want to give you some details, not just about our funding, but funding with the county and funding with city community agency grants. Then we'll end with a timeline and kind of prepare you for what's coming after this meeting, and then we're going to break out into groups. So I'll probably have you don't have to stay if you don't want to, but we really would love to hear your feedback. So we'll break out into groups and have facilitators will help lead you through that process. So the Consolidated Plan is a 5-year strategic plan that doesn't have any funding attached. We hear annually what our appropriation is going to be. And we put together this 5-year plan. It's due to HUD in the middle of May. It's required every 5 years, and it'll cover the period of July 1, 2025 to June 30th, 2030. As I said before, that it has extensive community engagement, is required public participation, consultation with our community partners, and these draft priorities are, they set goals and then high and low priority objectives, and that responds directly to what we can fund. So if we funded, which unfortunately we don't get the amount of funds that we wish that we could fund all of our even our high priority activities, but if we were to be able to fund all of our high priority activities, then we would go to funding low priority activities next. But that is part of the process that we have to comply with for HUD funding. The annual action plan is that annual plan we get told usually in February, although I don't think it'll happen this February, but we get told what our appropriation amount will be for 3 different funds. I'm going to go into that in a minute. 3 different funds, grant funds that we get at the city. And so the consolidated plan, the 5-year plan, also includes the year 1 plan, which starts July 1. Funding is allocated annually. Community engagement is also required for that. So we do an annual action plan meeting every January, and you may have, I see familiar faces, so you may have participated in that. We don't do quite as much of a community engagement process, that we do kind of an abbreviated version of the annual action plan. But being able to look at these funds and look what our needs are annually allows us to stay relevant to whatever the needs are in the community, to stay flexible to changing resources. And then the CAPER, the C-A-P-E-R, is a Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report. That's an end-of-the-year report. And you can find our prior 5-year consolidated plan, the one that we're in right now. You can find our action plans, and you can find those end-of-the-year reports all on our webpage. That's the knoxvilletn.gov/development. So the 3 pots of funding are Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG. That's our most flexible funding. And in 2024, the year that we're in right now, the program year that we're in right now, we received about $1.6 million. And our funding has been cut 2% the last couple of years, and it's been cut greater than that in previous years. So we anticipate that we probably will get cut again, but we don't know yet. So CDBG provides decent housing and suitable living environment, expands economic opportunities for low and moderate income people. And then the second pot of funding is the Home Investment Partnerships Grant, or HOME for short. And we were cut almost 21% from the previous year, this year. So that was a huge cut that we were not expecting. So we're actually receiving just under $1 million in HOME funds. And HOME, as its name would imply, is to the funds are to increase home ownership and affordable housing opportunities for low and very low income Americans. And the last pot is our Emergency Solutions Grant, or ESG. We're under $150,000 for that. That was also cut in the current year. And that's the funding that HUD gives us to help support agencies that are working to provide services to our unhoused population. Things like street outreach, emergency shelter and services, rapid rehousing, homelessness prevention, and also to pay for our homelessness management information system. So right now, we have at less than $150,000 for the year in funds that we get from HUD for homeless services. Oh, wait, keep it at one more. The fine print at the bottom is the City of Knoxville also invests general funds. So I'm going to show you a chart here in a minute. But they support housing, homelessness services, and other community development activities, such as blight remediation, accessibility improvements, etc. So here's a chart of our HUD funding. And you'll see that that there is a pretty substantial rise between 2019 and 2021, and that was from COVID assistance that we got from the federal government through Housing and Urban Development. So we received quite a big increase in funding, and we have at this point, actually as of over a year ago, we have spent all of our ESGCV, that's our homeless funding, that was COVID related, and that was about 22 times. I told you that we get about $150,000 a year. We got 22 times that between 2020 and 2021. And those funds, the deadline to spend them was 2 Decembers ago, December 2023. And so we have none of those funds left, unfortunately. Our CDBG CV, which is our Community Development Block Grant COVID funding, we received about 5 times the amount that we normally get. And those funds have a deadline of June of 2026. We have very little funds left, and we're actually looking to get maybe our last contract going for that soon. So in the background, you can see in the shade, the kind of the faded lines are that previous graph that I just showed you of our HUD funding. But what you'll notice in the front of that are funds that the city has put in. These are city general funds, so not from the federal government, but from the city. So the city puts in homeless general funds that both match and even provide more than the match that we need for our ESG funds. These are funds that also are competitive, that you have to complete an application and go through that process to apply for these funds. And then the blue line is our affordable housing fund and our affordable rental development fund. So you can see the city funds really dwarf the HUD funds that are coming to our department. And I'm going to hand it over now to Hope Ely. She's going to talk to you about the timeline.
Hey everyone, thanks for being here. So I'm going to talk a little about community engagement and what we've done in this process and how we've gathered feedback in the community. And so our department's been kind of in a season of listening for the last 18 months or so. And so you can see here, this is kind of a timeline of some of the things that we've done over the last 18 months. And what I want to highlight is that, while you see some of these things in navy blue are things that we're required to do by the federal government, but a lot of these items are in the orange, meaning that these are things that our administration cares about and that we've done optionally just because they're important right now and they're things that our administration wants to know more about. And so we started in September of 2023 with the missing middle housing open houses. In December of that year, we had the Housing Summit. In January 2024, we contracted with a contractor to develop the Fair Housing Equity Plan and had public meetings and a survey through that effort. In March of 2024, we had the Mayor's Summit on Homelessness and released the updated housing strategy. In July, we released the draft equity plan. In August, we kicked off the Consolidated Plan Citizen Engagement and then wrap that up in November, and here we are in January 2025 to release the draft priorities for all of you to see. And so this has been a long effort, and I know I've seen many of you at some of those meetings and things, and so I just want you to know that everything that you participated is going into this plan, right? We're taking all of that with us, and so cumulatively, we're looking at about 11 public meetings. We have 18 focus groups and about 884 surveys that were completed. So specific to just the consolidated plan, we did a couple things. We kicked off with the Fair Housing Equity Plan, which we kind of say is the foundation that everything else is built off of. So that was completed this summer. And then we had a social media kickoff on August 1st, which also was the day that we launched our survey. And we released a survey, it was open from August 1st to October 31st. And it was open in English and in Spanish, and we had about 540 people respond to the survey. We also had 2 public meetings with an in-meeting polling option, and they've got 23 responses from that. Those are both in September. So HUD asks when you do your consolidated plan that you reach out to specific populations and that you really try to reach out to the people who are going to benefit from the money that you're distributing. And so they ask that you reach out to individuals experiencing homelessness and individuals with disabilities, low-income populations, minority groups, things like that. And so we did 9 different focus groups with over 99 participants. You can see some of those we spoke with is the Mayor's Council on Disability Issues, the Youth Action Board, which is made up of youth who've experienced homelessness, African American Equity Restoration Task Force, Knox Pride, the Construction Career Ladder Roundtable, and we sent out questionnaires to some of our partner agencies and got 8 responses to that. So we've heard from Legal Aid and CAC, KUB, Bridge Refugee Services, McNabb Center, things like that. And so we take all of that feedback and we're going to use all of that in just a minute. So the last thing that the Consolidated Plan asks us to do is to look at local research. And one of the coolest things about my job is that I get to work with a lot of really smart people. And so all of these different publications, and we've looked at a lot of different research sources and things that were created. So we looked at the CAP Reimagined Plan, we looked at the Transforming Western Plan, the Vision Zero plan, the CAC needs assessment, Knox HMIS data, the YHTP grant application. So we look at all of these things and we crunch all of these things together. And that's kind of how we have come to our funding priorities. So Bailey's going to talk just specifically about the community needs survey and some of the data that came out of that process.
Okay, so like Hope said, we had an online survey that was available August 1st through October 31st. It was available in English and Spanish. This is the English language version of some of the surveys that we distributed. We had about 540 respondents. People were also allowed to request a paper copy of the survey, which is included in that 540. And so the contents of the survey, the first 9 questions asked about priority community needs in 9 different categories. So those categories are neighborhood needs, home ownership needs, rental housing needs, homelessness needs, housing and services for specific populations, economic development needs, public service needs, public infrastructure needs, and public facility needs. The 10th question we asked, of those categories listed above, which 3 are the most urgent or most important to you? And then the remaining questions were primarily demographic questions. And then, so we're going to start by going through some of the demographic information. And I'll note that none of the questions were required. So if you notice that some of them don't add up to 540, it's because not everyone answered the question. So here on the left, we have the age of the participants. Across the bottom are different age categories, and each bar represents the number of people who said they're in that category. And at the very top of each of those bars is the exact number of people in that category. So you can see our largest category was age 25 to 34. That's about 28% of the participants. And then on the right, we just have some other kind of demographic highlights. 55% of participants identified as female. 21% have or live with someone with a disability. I believe the national stat is 1 in 4 people have a disability. And then 9% identified as being LGBTQIA+, with national that's between 7 and 8%. And then this is the racial breakdown of participants. You'll see that 69% were white, 18% were BIPOC or Black, Indigenous, people of color. Those included in that stat have the asterisk beside them. 11% identified as Black or African American, and about 11% had a blank or non-applicable answer. And so 69% for Knoxville was pretty representative. The other categories, not as much. So this is why those other feedback sources we talked about, like our focus groups and our questionnaires, were a really important part of supplementing this information. And then I'll also note that this question did not allow participants to select both race and ethnicity, unfortunately, so someone could not indicate that they were white and non-Hispanic, for example. Here on the left, we have the income of our respondents. The categories across the bottom are based on area median income. So before I talk about this chart, I'm going to talk about this table here on the right, so I'm going to talk about what that means. So each year, HUD releases annual income limits for its program, and that includes, it's based off of the area median income of the area. So just as an example, the area median income for a family of 4 living in the Knoxville metropolitan statistical area is $91,000. And so the percentage you fall into depending on how many people are in your household. So let's take that family of 4, for example. If you're a family of 4 and you are making $60,000, you're making somewhere between 51 and 80% of area income, so you'd be in that category. Another example, if you and your partner both make $30,000, then you are above 80% area median income for your household size. So that is to say, the above 80% is not like the top 1% of earners. If you're making 80%, you're still below median income. And so why is this question important? These funding sources we're talking about are supposed to be serving people who are between 0 and 80% AMI. So it's important that we hear from those groups. And so back on the chart over here, you'll see that 51% were over 80% area median income, 30% were low to moderate income. Again, that's the people who are between 0 and 80%, and about 19% did not respond. About 55% of respondents were homeowners, and about 32% were renters. It's closer to 50-50 in Knoxville. We also asked if, in the past 12 months, have you had trouble making a mortgage payment, a rent payment, or utility payment? And so you see about 18% of homeowners said yes, and then about 58% of renters said yes. And we didn't have a very large sample size of low-income homeowners, but if you were to add that in, they were more likely to say they were having trouble making a payment, so there's definitely some nuance to this as far as like income. And then you remember earlier we talked about that question 10, we asked which of these categories are the most like important or urgent to you. And so this shows you how respondents chose. Everyone picked 3, so that's why it's more than 340, but those in order were homelessness, rental housing, infrastructure, public services, home ownership, specific populations, economic development, neighborhood needs, and public facilities. And then we'll go through each of these categories and show you which activities people selected. But I also wanted to show you how different populations answered this question. For low to moderate income individuals, their top were rental housing, homelessness, and economic development. For BIPOC individuals, it was rental housing, homelessness, and public services. For homeowners, the top 3 were homelessness, infrastructure, and rental housing. And for renters, it was rental housing, homelessness, and infrastructure. So there's a definite theme here as far as it comes to like rental housing and homelessness. Some consistency there, but a few differences in these top 2 groups. And so for homelessness needs, for each of these, I won't read all of them to you. Again, this will be available on the webpage, but I'll kind of highlight what the top 3 were in each of these categories. So for homelessness needs, we have homeless prevention services, permanent supportive housing, and rapid housing services. For rental housing, top was rental assistance, eviction prevention services, and rehabilitation. That includes like emergency and minor home repairs. Infrastructure, the top were street improvements for pedestrians, public transit, and parks, which include community gardens and greenways. This question also allowed people to write in some of their own feedback, and just some general themes we pulled out of there included repairing potholes, more and or free parking, reducing traffic congestion and speeding, and electrical grid improvements. For public services, we had health services that also included mental health services, child care, substance abuse, and addiction services. And this one also had a write-in where some of the themes included services for individuals with disabilities, services for individuals experiencing homelessness, harm reduction services, and transportation services. For homeownership, the top 3 were rehabilitation, including minor emergency and minor home repairs, energy efficiency improvements, and down payment and closing cost assistance. And this one's interesting because there's a very clear theme for like the top 3 ahead of the other responses. This one had a lot of responses, so it might be a little hard to read all of these, but the top 3, this was asking for housing and services for specific populations. The top 3 here is for individuals with mental health issues, those experiencing homelessness, and those experiencing domestic violence. The top 3. And then these were the last 3 in that top category section I showed you, so I put these together. For economic development, the top 3 is job creation, support for existing businesses and redeveloping areas, support for minority and women-owned businesses. For neighborhood needs, we have affordability of housing, public services, overall quality of life in the neighborhood, and in public facilities, we have neighborhood and community centers, homeless shelters, and youth centers. And then the other feedback, the writing feedback, included drug rehabs and harm reduction facilities, disability resource center specifically for all ages, and then a resource/day center for people experiencing homelessness. And Hope's going to talk a little bit more about some of the qualitative data.
So we use the survey kind of as the frame that we hang the rest of the feedback off of. And so collected a lot of feedback through the focus groups, through the questionnaires, through the public meetings. And so here's some of what we heard you say. We heard you say that Knoxville has housing needs, including affordable housing, specifically a need for permanent supportive housing, gap funding to increase housing stock, affordable housing with supportive services to maintain housing, incentives for ADA units above basic requirements, more affordable single-family homes, workforce housing or housing for individuals who aren't eligible for vouchers, and incentives to become a Section 8 landlord. And a couple of these you'll see have the purple highlighting, and so those are things that we've highlighted because they're consistent with the findings from our Fair Housing Equity Plan as well, and so you'll see that kind of peppered through. Knoxville has homeownership needs. People would like to see more money for homeownership and more inventory, foreclosure prevention assistance and property tax assistance, home repair services to keep people in their homes, and programs to move renters to become homeowners, including things like down payment assistance. In addition to the specific populations that Bailey mentioned, there are other specific populations that have housing and service needs, which include individuals experiencing high service needs that exceed permanent supportive housing, individuals who are discharged from mental hospitals to the street, individuals who are aging out of foster care, individuals who lack income and insurance for nursing homes, veterans, survivors of human trafficking, and refugees and Asian families. And finally, Knoxville has a need for housing navigation services, and this includes the need for a functional, accessible housing unit database, a housing database for individuals at all income levels, and a few people mentioned wanting to see the New Jersey model that was talked about at the Mayor's Summit on Homelessness, which includes this kind of one-stop shop for housing navigation services. We heard you say that Knoxville has social service needs. This includes homelessness prevention, so focusing on keeping individuals housed. It includes education on tenants' rights and helping tenants to understand their options during the eviction process. And eviction prevention assistance, including rent utility assistance for everyone, but specifically for individuals and families who've been to court, who have an eviction notice, Knox County Schools families that are precariously housed, and refugee populations. Knoxville needs emergency shelter and services above and beyond what we currently have. So we have shelter and services, but many people indicated that they wanted to see more diversity among shelter types. So that would include shelter for different types of families and situations. For instance, if you have a father and his minor children, there currently is not a shelter space for that family type. So people also wanted to see shelter that was not faith-based, shelter for young adults and college students, shelter for disabled seniors, LGBTQIA affirming shelter, and low barrier shelter. We heard you say that we need public facilities, including a drop-in center where individuals, especially youth and young adults, can access internet, phone, laundry, hygiene supplies, things like that, and accessibility improvements for public facilities. And then other social service needs, people indicated that they needed more free and affordable mental, dental, and medical health care, more affordable child care to support working parents, programs to support individuals who are age 17 and up as they transition into adulthood, financial empowerment programs, which include homebuyer education, workforce training, including apprenticeship and free apprenticeship programs, and accessible food banks. And we heard you say that Knoxville has neighborhood needs. This includes infrastructure, especially related to public transportation. Several people talked about the need for this last mile transportation or transportation from the CAT bus stop to your home or workplace, or CAT or some kind of public transit for third shift workers and things like that, and the need for microtransit. We heard about the need for sidewalk connectivity, especially around public transit stops, and free water and bathroom access downtown. We heard you say that there are specific neighborhood needs, including the need to incentivize commercial development and businesses to revitalize neighborhoods, especially in opportunity zones and lower income neighborhoods. People wanted to see more geographically equitable grocery stores. People wanted to see the city repurpose buildings that it owns into housing, and wanted to see more resources to help neighborhoods organize, and these especially neighborhoods in East Knoxville. We heard you say that we need more support for nonprofits and not-for-profit organizations. So this includes meeting spaces for organizations and free community meeting spaces. I need a land bank for nonprofit developers, and need funding to support nonprofit staff capacity building. And then just other general neighborhood needs is a need for resources and support to combat NIMBYism, or not in my backyard situations where housing developers are coming to a neighborhood to bring more housing, but maybe met with opposition from the neighborhood. I need help with the plans review and inspection challenges. I need help. I would like to see the minimum wage be raised. There was a really cool kid that we talked to that talked about the need for better foster care parent screenings and the need for home repair contractors. So we take that and then we ground truth it with local data. And so if you've been to one of our public meetings in the last 5 years, you've seen this data before. But I think it's a really good way to kind of see how the needs are changing in our community. And so the city of Knoxville and Knox County has the 211 service request call line. So you have a need, you can call 211, and 211 will connect you with services related to whatever your needs are. And so you can look at this and see where the calls are going to kind of see where the greatest needs are in the community. So we'll look at the first year. This first column is 2019. We'll call it the last kind of normal year. And you can see, all that even in 2019, the requests for housing and shelter and utilities were still the top 2 requests, right? Then we had 2020, and I think that those spikes kind of make sense to a lot of us, that there were a lot of needs in 2020 around the pandemic. Those needs started to trickle down and lessen in 2021 and 2022. But then in 2023, the need for housing and shelter, or the housing and shelter requests kicked back up, and then have continued to increase in 2024. So if we look at that 1987, this top blue line here, and we look at like what is made up of. So 41% of those requests were for rental assistance, 22% were for shelters, 16% was for low-cost housing, and 9% was for home repair and maintenance costs. So housing and shelter is still kind of the top thing that 211 receives calls for. We've also got some other data that supports some of what we've been hearing in the community. And so one of the things that we have is that we're lucky to have the UT SWARP's social work office manage our Knox HMIS community dashboard. And so this is a public-facing dashboard with information about homelessness in our community. It's tracked by quarter, and you can see all kinds of information about what it's like for individuals experiencing homelessness. And so here you can see they've tracked what the homelessness numbers by what they have indicated is their cause of homelessness. And so the most reported causes of homelessness are the lack of affordable housing and evictions. And then in April 2024 to September 2024, emergency bed utilization rate averaged about 88%. And I think that that's important because we'll call these kind of the warm months, right? We kind of expect that shelter numbers will be low in the summer, and when it's warmer, they'll increase in the winter, right? And so if in September 2024 shelter bed utilization rate is around 88%, then we can anticipate that it's higher now that we're in January. We also looked at affordable housing needs data. So from 2020 to 2023, the Knoxville median gross rent increased by 26%, or about $310, while median household income increased by about 17%. Some of the reasons that we have seen this increase in housing prices is due to underbuilding. And so after the Great Recession, a lot of development in the region kind of trickled to almost to a total standstill. And so we had a few years where there were almost no units being built in the area, right? And so that was okay when the population was fairly stable, but sometime around 2019, I think that word got out that Knoxville is awesome and population started to increase, right? And so you've got this kind of long-term underbuilding and then this population increase, and I think that helped to drive up the cost of housing. And so Knoxville needs about 1,200 to 1,600 new housing units a year over 5 years to just accommodate the demand. So housing costs are also impacted by the increasing cost of buildable land and construction materials, labor shortages, and rising interest rates. And this is about cost burden. So in the HUD world, the percentage of cost burden is very important. And so this information comes from our updated housing strategy. But here you can see that more than 50% of renters are paying more than 30% of their income on housing. And so that includes not just rent, but also utilities, property taxes, things like that. And 25% of renters are paying more than 50% of their income on rent. And so we call that severely cost burdened. And that is what we would consider to be kind of unsustainable for a family to spend that much of your income on rent. And then the last thing that I want to show here is this is the median estimated property tax value from the National Association of Realtors. And I think that it's interesting to kind of see how Knoxville's doing kind of compared to the state of Tennessee and the US. And so I know this is hard to see, I'm sorry, but it'll be bigger on your screen at home. But so you see here, the blue line is Knoxville kind of trending with the state of Tennessee below national averages and stuff. And then in 2021, we see Knoxville increase, have that big increase there, and then it's higher than the U.S. average in November of 2024. And so some of that is due to that underbuilding that we talked about, is that there just are not enough units to meet the current demand. But also we've had a large population spike, kind of see a population spike around that same period of time. And so I think that that's interesting. And so a house that in 2019 that was valued about $250,000 is now valued at around $405,000. So some supporting data for accessible housing needs. There are two kind of subpopulations that really stood out when in this research. The first was seniors, or individuals who are 65 and up. The greatest increase in population in Knoxville has been among seniors. CAC shares that by 2030, 19% of Knox County residents will be 65 and up. And many seniors in Knoxville struggle, especially with rising housing costs and inflation driving up the cost of food and other necessities. And this increase in the number of seniors, especially those who live alone, is increasing demand for smaller, affordable, accessible homes. So Knoxville needs more single-level homes, age-friendly designs, and communities with accessible features. The other subpopulation that we heard their high needs for is unaccompanied youth and young adults. So that's youth who are aged 10 to 24. And BIPOC and LGBTQIA youth and young adults are overrepresented among those experiencing homelessness. And Knoxville needs more youth-specific housing. So the youth that we talked to and the youth in the research have said that entry-level wages, limited credit, and no knowledge of the complex housing system create additional barriers for youth and young adults. We also have data on social service needs. So poverty rates are higher among seniors and children. 28% of children in Knoxville live in poverty. In 2021, 22.5% of Knoxville residents live below the federal poverty level. Most of Knoxville is in what we call a child care desert. 65% of homes with children younger than 6 have no adult to watch them. So this is compared to about 35% in 1975. And many unaccompanied youth are hesitant to engage with the homelessness service system because they feel unsafe and maybe have experienced victimization in the shelter system. And this is a snapshot from the United Way Bright Steps Action Plan. So some community needs they've identified. Less than 40% of Knox County students are performing on grade level. More than 80% of economically disadvantaged students are behind in reading and math. And on average, 50% of parents are paying more than a third of their income on childcare costs. And then the last thing that I want to talk about is fair housing needs. And this data is taken from the Fair Housing Equity Plan, which is also available on our website. So the Fair Housing Equity Plan identified that housing segregation by race is moderate by national standards, but still artificially inflated. So increasing housing choices would improve racial disparities. Public and private developers should continue to deconcentrate poverty by developing affordable units in middle-income neighborhoods and more neighborhoods. There's limited evidence of systemic discrimination, but hundreds of discriminatory incidents may occur annually, and fair housing infrastructure is currently inadequate to address these issues. 1 out of 6 in Knoxville report having a disability. Establishing a database of accessible units and ensuring compliance with accessibility rules could improve housing opportunities for persons with disabilities. And the plan recommended that Knoxville establish a housing resource center, encourage developers to provide economic mobility counseling, support fair housing enforcement, expand housing options, and prioritize economic development in the lower income areas. So this is a lot, but I would encourage you, there's also more information on that website where you can kind of see a more condensed version of the findings from this report, but it is really interesting. So we take these things, we take the public feedback that we've received, we take the consultation with local experts, we take research local data, and we dump it all into a big ugly spreadsheet, right? And but those aren't the only things that we have to consider as we draft these priorities. So we also have to consider complementary initiatives. So we heard a lot of people speak about the need for microtransit and the need for expanded public transit options. But we know that Cat Reimagined just released their new plan for public transit, and part of that new plan includes microtransit, right? So it doesn't make sense for us to duplicate something that Cat's actively trying to do. Same with potholes. Some people mentioned that they're unhappy with the potholes in Knoxville, and while that's a real concern, it may not be the best use of these funds when we have a public service department that just deals with potholes, right? So we look at complementary initiatives and make sure that we're using the best resources for this type of work. We also have to look at regulatory constraints, and so HUD comes with HUD funds comes with a lot of rules. Statewide we have rules, so one of the things that we heard was that people wanted to see us raise the minimum wage, right? That's not something that we as a city department have the power to do. That has to happen at the state or federal level. We also heard a lot of people say that we need public services, especially rent assistance. And so rent assistance is an example of what we call public service. And under CDBG, public services are capped at 15% of our total allocation. And the reason for that is that CDBG was kind of genius when they came up with this 50 years ago. And they really wanted to bring the money to the community and invest in things that last, right? And so public services like mobile meals delivery or something, those are really beneficial programs, but you feed someone and their belly is full until the next meal, right? But by putting the bulk of our funds into more permanent projects, we're building things that last. So if you put it into an accessibility ramp, that's going to be there for many people to benefit over and over and over again. And so I think that's why CDBG did that and put that cap there. But unfortunately, it does create barriers on some of the programs in that we can't fund a lot of public service activities. And then we also have to consider funding, timing, staff capacity, available organizations, and other logistical things like that. And so we don't have unlimited funding, we don't have unlimited time, we don't have unlimited staff. We heard someone say that they wanted to see us replace the Civic Coliseum. And while that may or may not be an issue for you, that's probably not the best use of our funds at this time when there are other more pressing needs. But I do want to, put a plug out there. And so we heard from many people that Knoxville has a need for an accessible housing database. And while that's not something that we have the capacity to do as a staff, that is something that our community definitely has the capacity to do as a community. We can make an accessible housing database and then not be talking about this in 5 years, right? So I like it when I see low-hanging fruit. So I'm going to pass it over to Kevin, and he's going to kick us off for the next part.
All right. Now we're going to transition to talk about priorities. And based on what we've heard and the input provided, we've established 4 main overarching goals. Number 1, keep people housed. That's our chief goal, keep people housed. Number 2 is encourage housing development. We need to simply build more housing. Number 3, transform blighted properties in neighborhoods or blighting influences. And number 4 is promote housing equity, the fairness, just what Hope just went over. Those are our 4 overarching goals, and Linda's going to dive into each one of those more specifically.
Thank you. There's a lot of information, and you've got a sheet in front of you that I want to explain to you how it's organized to help you understand it better. So under the goals, we're going to give an example so that the sheet will make a little bit more sense. So under goal is the first one that Kevin mentioned, which was keep people housed. And then there's an objective underneath that goal, and in this example of keep people housed, the objective is housing rehabilitation. And that's how the objective is how we're going to meet that goal. And then we have on the right-hand side are the activities to accomplish that objective. These are the project types that can be funded to meet the objective. So in this example, the activities under housing rehabilitation could be emergency home repair or lead paint remediation. Then there's priorities, and this is where I was telling you before about HUD asks us to set high and low priorities. They used to have a medium priority, but they got rid of that a few years back. So now it's high and low. But we also do have some things that are required. So priorities identify whether it's high or low in terms of funding priority or whether it's required that we do it. And then lastly, in the middle there is the funding source, and that's the HUD grant that can fund the specific activity. And as I talked with you about in the beginning of the meeting, CDBG is our most flexible funding. So often you'll see CDBG mentioned along with other things. CDBG, we are capped on public service, as Hope was explaining, but public services can include assistance for homelessness. And home is probably the most restrictive, and that it has to be used for affordable housing. So I'm going to take you through this sheet, and the first goal is to keep people housed. So high priority activities are emergency home repair, energy efficiency and weatherization improvements, rental rehabilitation, owner-occupied rehabilitation. This is rehabilitation of the housing, not the occupant. So it's rehabilitation of the housing to bring it up to a housing standard. Also high would be accessibility modifications so that people can access their homes. And one of the required things, and we actually have a grant that we were awarded by HUD to do lead-based paint remediation. So we can also use some of our CDBG and our home funds for that as well. The second objective is served under Keep People Housed is services for individuals experiencing homelessness. High priority activities include rapid rehousing services and emergency shelter services and other short-term housing, including low barrier shelter. Required would be the homelessness management information system. That is a record keeping that is kept through the University of Tennessee Social Work Department and a coordinated entry. So those are required by HUD. Also under Keep People Housed are the objectives eviction prevention, homelessness prevention, and fair housing counseling and tenant rights education are high priorities under that objective. Economic empowerment and financial resilience would be another objective, and high priority would be mortgage readiness programs, including down payment and closing cost assistance. Required would be supporting existing businesses, organizations, and redevelopment areas, and supporting minority and women-owned businesses. And then we have some lower priority items. Under the objective social services, high priority items are health services, including mental health services and child care. The second goal is encourage housing development. Under the objective affordable housing, our high priorities, new rental property construction. Required is to partner with our community housing development organizations, or CHODOs, to develop and preserve housing. So HUD has a requirement that we set aside a percentage of our home funds to go to these community housing development organizations. Under the objective accessible housing with built-in supportive services, high priority activities are more permanent supportive housing, housing for individuals with disabilities, seniors and veterans, housing for individuals experiencing domestic violence, and housing for unaccompanied youth. The third goal is transforming blighted properties, and one of the things that is required is planning for organizations in low to moderate income census tracts. And the fourth is promoting housing equity. And those high priority items include a housing resource center with housing navigation services, an accessible housing database, economic mobility programs, and prioritizing opportunity and site selection for multifamily housing. And some required activities are affirmative marketing campaigns and supporting fair housing advocacy and enforcement efforts. And now I'd like to introduce Susan to talk about transforming Weston.
Hi, I'm Susan Troop. I work at KCDC as the Transforming Western Plan Manager, and I'm just going to give a real brief overview of this project. As you may have heard, in 2022, KCDC, in partnership with the City of Knoxville, was awarded a Federal Choice Neighborhoods Implementation Grant by HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development. This $40 million award is directed toward revitalizing the area of Western Heights and the Beaumont neighborhood. The plan, named Transforming Western, will leverage the $40 million award to raise matching public and private dollars to complete the plan. Transforming Western consists of three main components: neighborhood, housing, and people. And you'll see this all really does follow everything that you just heard. HUD has found that by targeting these three areas, neighborhoods can not only be improved, but transformed. The Transforming Western Plan is the result, kind of like this whole process, of 15 months of community meetings and the resulting collective vision of all the residents of Western Heights in the Beaumont neighborhood for a safe neighborhood for all, with new housing and programming for children and adults. The leadership of KCDC, the City of Knoxville, Knox County Community Action Committee, Brinshore Development, and many other partners will use resident feedback to transform Western Heights into a neighborhood of choice for current and future residents. I gotta grab my water real quick. The goals of the neighborhood, housing, and people components of the plan are as follows: to create a neighborhood that is safe and welcoming with improved access to transportation, the arts, entrepreneurship, recreation, and parks. To build and manage housing that serves households with a mix of incomes, increased choices, and takes advantage of a unique site. To empower and support residents of Western Heights to improve education, health, youth opportunities, economic stability, and food security. The City of Knoxville has committed funds to help accomplish the neighborhood goals in the Transforming Western Plan. And this is already underway. We have our phase 1 of housing that we are hoping will be completed sometime this year, and that picture is of that housing that is currently going up. The neighborhood plan, I'm just going to talk a little bit more about some of the projects within the neighborhood component. There's a lot more. You can read more about the people plan and about the housing plan on our website at transformingwestern.com. But we're going to talk specifically about the neighborhood projects that the city is helping us to fund. The neighborhood plan consists of the following projects to help meet the neighborhood goals. Number 1 is the expansion of the Boys and Girls Club. Additional space will be added to the Boys and Girls Club as part of a renovation project, and it will include the introduction of a new teen club, additional class space, and a community room that will be accessible for use by use by other youth development partners serving Western Heights. There's a big need for, even as you said, for space for these groups to meet. The opening, it will also include the opening of a primary care clinic within Western Heights to provide better health access and preventative education for the residents. The relocation of the Knoxville Arts Center from its current location on Broadway to a new facility within Western Heights. This will provide the access to arts programming that the residents expressed they really desired. There will also be a Connections building, which will be located central to the neighborhood that will provide programming with an entrepreneurial focus in partnership with Junior Achievement, who will work with youth, and Real Good Kitchen. If you're familiar with that, it's entrepreneurial food business. A destination park will also be added, which will include a play lawn, pavilions, community gardens, and play structures. We're grateful to the City of Knoxville's commitment to the Transforming Western Plan, and we're excited to see the transformation of this much deserving community. And again, I encourage you, if you'd like to learn more, there's so much more to learn about the project. There's also videos of some of those meetings that were held with residents of Western Heights. You can find all that on our website, transformingwestern.com.
Thank you. Thank you. So what we're doing tonight then is talking about these broad concepts within the, our 5-year strategic plan. We'll be hearing more about these annually because again, HUD lets us know what our allocation for the CDBG, the home, and the ESG grants are. They let us know that annually. So you'll be hearing more at our action plan meetings about what we hope to be doing each year in accomplishing these goals. So the action plan, the year 1 action plan will be a part of this 5-year plan because the year 1 starts July 1. And then subsequent years, we have those meetings also in January and April to talk about what are the emerging needs in the community that we need to respond to, are the priorities changing at all, and allows us to be responsive to the funding that we are awarded. So the action plan meets the goals and objectives of the consolidated plan. It's also due on May 15th to HUD. Federal funding is allocated annually. We're anticipating that in February, but sometimes there are years when we don't get notification, and if we don't get notification of what our final amount is, then we can't submit our plan. So we have to wait and hear from HUD as to what that funding allocation is. It covers programs and projects from July 1, 2025 to June 30th, 2026. And it's designed to meet those high priority and required activities, both internally. We have some internal programs and also applications that are received from community partners. So let me talk to you a little bit about the application process. So beginning January 31st, that's this Friday, and it ends on February 21st at 4:30. So that's when our deadline is. If you're representing an agency that is interested in applying for funds, then the applications will be available Friday, and they'll be due February 21st at 4:30 p.m. We're accepting applications for homeless grants, which includes the Emergency Solutions Grant and also some of the city homeless general funds. Community Development Block Grants, or CDBG. And those are 2 different applications. So when you're going on our website, you need to look for which application, or maybe both if you're interested in applying for both. Our home grant applications are taken throughout the year, so those don't have any firm deadline, and you won't be applying for those funds in this cycle, but you're more than welcome to reach out and let us know what ideas you may have. So attendance at an in-person technical assistance workshop is required. And this is for the grant that you're applying for. So if you're applying for community development block grant funds, you've got to attend a workshop for community development block grant funds. If you're interested in applying for homeless funds, you've got to attend the workshop for homeless grant funds. And we give you, we're actually doing those on 2 different days. I think that's on the next slide. But you can go to knoxville.tn.gov/development, and there's a link there to current grant opportunities, and you'll find more information there. All applications will be submitted in Zoom grants. And if you've never used Zoom grants before, we can help you with that too. And applications remain open then until 4:30 on Friday, the 21st of February. So the homeless grants technical assistant workshops are Thursday, February 6th from 2:30 to 3:30 p.m. And are they going to be here? And they're going to be here in this room. And Wednesday, February 12th from 10:30 to 11:30. So we try to accommodate different schedules and different times when you may be able to meet. So it's a requirement for each agency that's applying for those funds to send a staff person, send a board member, send a volunteer, any of that's fine. But it's actually required that you sign in for the workshop that you'll be applying for. For Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG, it's Thursday, February 6th from 3:30 to 4:30, and Wednesday, February 12th from 9:30 to 10:30. You're in this building. And I want to introduce Jennifer Searle, and she's going to talk with you about city community agency grants. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So as you can tell, the city has a number of programs that help with housing and housing-related needs. The city also funds community agency grants, and those funds fund community and social service organizations in our community, and also arts and culture organizations. Since Mayor Kincannon has been in office, we have funded over $8 million in grants to community groups. And our grants are a little more flexible and can be used for operations and or capital requests. So, and in some cases people request both, but we can't do everything all the time, but that is a possibility. So your operations requests would be things like your staff and your rent, utilities, programmatic costs, and those types of things. The capital requests are really specifically just related to new construction additions or renovations of your building. To qualify for a community agency grant, your organization must be a 501c3 for at least 5 years, and you must have Senate registration with the Tennessee Secretary of State. The application is currently online and available. We are also using Zoom grants. This is the first time for us to use that platform, but there are resources available on the application if you have questions. So it's really important that your organization read through the goals and priorities that are available on the website, your organization might be serving, a broad regional area of the surrounding counties, but specifically what you want to present on your City of Knoxville grant application would be how you are addressing the needs of the City of Knoxville and how many people you're serving in the City of Knoxville. So those things, our priorities are public safety, healthy and connected neighborhoods, a clean and resilient future, and thriving businesses and good jobs. So last year, as you probably know, cities, states, and counties have been granted settlement dollars because of the opioid abatement. What am I thinking? Anyway, the settlement dollars that have been that the drug companies have had to pay out have now started to trickle down. And so the state and county and city all have some dollars to allocate. Last year was our first year, and we had allocated $310,000 for that. And this current FY, we have allocated an additional $300,000. These are very prescribed services that can be provided. And so, and we're looking for organizations that have been doing this work and working in this field. And for that, you have to have a minimum of 2 years. You have to have been a 501c3 for a minimum of 2 years to qualify for that. The deadline for both the opioid and the community agency grant is the 21st at 4 p.m. And there's links and my contact information. I have business cards, and I'm available by email. So please reach out if you have any questions. Thank you.
So note that if you're an agency that is interested in applying for either of these funding sources, the HUD grants are due at 4:30 on February 21st, but the community agency grants are due at 4 o'clock on February 21st, so I just want to make note of that. Next, I'd like to introduce Alana McKissick, and she is with Knox County Grants and Community Development, and she'll tell you just a little bit about the funding that Knox County receives. And this is for the area that is outside the city. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. My name is Alana. I'm with Knox County Grants and Community Development. Very much like the city, we are also going through our 5-year consolidated planning process. We are really kicking things off next week, so we're starting with some stakeholder workshops. Something that's available to the public is our public meeting, which is on Tuesday, February 4th at 5:30 at the Knox County Health Department, and that can be found on our website, which is information on that. You can attend on Zoom. It's knoxcounty.org/community development. We're also seeking input through a community survey. We have it available in English and Spanish as well. Like Linda said, we are limited in our HUD funding to spending it within unincorporated areas of the county, just because the city also receives funding. So most of our projects will occur outside of the city limits. Homelessness services, we consider anyone experiencing homeless able to benefit from all funds. So that is the only thing that isn't really limited to that. So those are just 2 ways you can, if you would like an agency, if you'd like to participate in one of these workshops, you are more than welcome to. You can just let me know. In addition to that, we are going to be opening up our applications for the funding that is tied to this, and those are going to release next week. So if you would like to learn about applying for funding through our HUD programs, I have some business cards as well. This email address and phone number go directly to me. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Yes.
Thank you, Bailey. So after we receive your input, which we're going to get here in just a few minutes, we're going to finalize our goals and objectives, and our draft funding priorities will become our funding priorities. So we hope to do that by Friday. The year 1 application opens on January 31st. The draft of our plan, so once we know who's applying for the funds and what they're proposing to do, the kinds of activities that they're proposing to do to meet these high priority objectives, then we'll be able to put that into a draft plan, and then we're going to release that in April. So ideally around April 1st. No April Fools. But we'll release that, and our year 1 action plan will have a 30-day public comment. So we'll release the plan, you'll have an opportunity to read it and view it, and we'll have a public meeting during that time. So it'll be our second public meeting on April 22nd, 6 o'clock in this room. And then we will take that to City Council, to have them review it and hopefully approve that. And the last date that we can do that, if it's due on May 15th, will be April 29th. And then it's scheduled to be due to HUD on May 15th. But again, that date is a little bit flexible. I think statute says it has to be turned into HUD sometime in mid-August. But they have to get the numbers to us. We have to know actually how much funding we're looking at before we can actually turn in our plan. And then program year 2025 begins on July 1st. So I want to thank you. This is a lot to sit through. We've been here for I think a little bit more than an hour and a half. Really appreciate you all being so patient and holding your questions. But now is really going to be your opportunity to tell us what you think.